Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Follygon, and today I have a quick tutorial for you for getting render passes from ZBrush into Photoshop. So if you're not familiar with this tactic, it might sound a little foreign, but essentially you just want to grab a couple different material passes, lighting setups, different passes for ambient occlusion, maybe specularity, certain things like that, and then you composite all that together in Photoshop. If you'd like to see the speed sculpt of the Flying Nimbus, you can stick around till the end of the tutorial section, which will be about 17 minutes long, and then the last about 5 minutes or so will be the speed sculpt portion of the Nimbus. So you can stick around till then, or you can just go ahead and skip the tutorial if you don't really care about that. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into this tutorial. So first up, you want to set up your render in the view that you want. Luckily, I already have the angle here that I need. So first up, I need to set my document size here, unclick Pro, and I'm just going to set my width and height to 3000 just as a personal preference. Click Resize, zoom on out here, clear my canvas, and put our model back on there. You might want to turn on perspective, mess with your perspective a little bit, whatever you need to do. Next up, I'm going to come on over to Movie, turn on my timeline, click Show here, and I'm just going to click on the timeline here. They're going to lock my orientation to a specific view so that if I ever move my camera or do anything, I can just snap it back real quick by dragging on this little slider. Now that I have my camera view set, I'm just going to click Quick Save so that if I crash, I can just come right back in here. And I'm gonna go ahead and come on into my render palette and grab everything I need for the basic render passes that I want. You can mess with your light a little bit too if you want to for your initial render. Maybe make it more front on or maybe from a side, depending on your preference or what you're going for. I'm just gonna keep the generic kind of three-quarter center light. And I'm going to render with shadows, AO, SSS, subsurface scattering, and wax preview. And first I'm going to go ahead and do a best render, and that's going to go from top to bottom here real fast. And then I'm going to do a BPR as well. Now that my best render is complete, I can click Document Export and save that where I need to. And then from here I can go ahead and turn it back to Preview and do a BPR. When your BPR is complete, come on over to your render palette here and open up Bpr Render Passes, and all your passes are down here, and you can click each one to export each image individually. Now we can go ahead and grab a couple other render passes from here. So I'm just going to shift click my paintbrush to make sure everything is turned off, and we will go ahead and do a flat color, turn on mRGB, and we'll choose red. Click Fill Object for our cloud, and for the ball here, we'll set it to blue and click Fill Object. And now I will just go ahead and do a quick BPR with all of these turned off, and that's going to give me a nice little ID image that I can use as a selection tool inside of Photoshop. For a Specular Pass, you could try the Basic Material 2 and set your color to black, making sure that paint is turned off, and then go ahead and do a BPR like that, and you can see here where that specularity is showing. And there are a couple other spec passes you could get if you would like to grab some toy plastic down here. You can also get some really sharp spec or even a little bit of ambient color thrown in there as well, just to brighten up your image if you'd like to do that. Again, play with your light, play with different materials to see what kind of results you're going to get. If you're not sure about this process, you're going to see here in a minute what all this is doing. I like to use my Follygon matte black and white clay. You can go ahead and download this for free on Gumroad and just set the color to complete black and render with a light. What I like to do is I like to put the light on the left and the right side and then colorize those lights. So I'll show you how to do that once we get in Photoshop. So I'll call this light 1, and we'll shift the light over to the right side and call that light 2 after we render that out. And let's grab a front light as well. Actually, instead of a front light, we're just going to click on our ball and that'll give us a rim light, which is really nice. We can play around with this a little bit, just try to get a little bit more interesting light coming off of here. So that looks pretty good, so let's go ahead and render that out and export that image. If you'd like to go ahead and grab different material specs, anything else, now would be the time to do it. Go ahead, just play around with your materials, with the colors of those materials, kind of seeing what results you're getting. If you're looking to use a material as a light source, shining onto your model that you can comp in Photoshop, make sure that the parts that you don't want to receive the light are completely black. So in this case, because it's not completely black here, it will light up the entire image and light up the parts where the specularity is even more. So if we drop that down quite a bit, maybe almost completely black, we can get a little bit of a soft speck. Spec, for those who don't know, stands for specularity, or just the shininess of that object. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into Photoshop, and I can show you a few things here. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is how to quickly load in images all into one file. So you're going to go into File, Scripts, load files into Stack, then you're going to be able to browse for your images here, and you're going to be able to import all of these at once, minus the PSDs. So I just went ahead and imported all those at once. That's awesome. We got all of our files here as layers. And then I'm just going to press Control O to open up these PSDs separately. Now for each of these images here, I'm going to have to come up into Image, Mode, and set it to Grayscale, so that when I click and drag it into here, I still have the same box dimensions that I can line up with my image. Then I can go ahead and close that because I no longer need it, and go ahead and do that to these as well. And make sure you rename these as you pull them in, just so you know what they are. And for the depth pass, the depth is the only one whose mode is actually set to grayscale, so you don't need to change that. You can just go ahead and click and drag it in. Now from here, you might want to organize your layers a little bit, just so you kind of have a little bit of an idea of where everything is. I like to work from the bottom up and turn off and on layers as I go. Next up, I'm just going to set my background color here as white on the most bottom of layers, and then I'm going to press Control A and Control C to copy all of that and throw it on here as a layer mask. So clicking the layer mask button, alt clicking here, and pressing Control V. Now that that's there, when we click back on this image for this layer, we're going to see that it is masked out. For me, the BPR, or Best Preview Render, is almost useless. I'm not really liking the material render that I got from there. So real quick here, we'll just jump back in, grab this ball, and let's throw a MAH shiny on there. We'll go ahead and open that up and throw it on our composition. Don't forget to save your image. I just like to call my file comp as I'm working on it, and then save out multiple versions as I go, just so I have version control. Let's go ahead and use our ID mask here so that we can grab just the ball. So I'm going to go up to Select Color Range and select the blue color, keeping this at 200. This is essentially your influence. Go ahead and click OK, and click the mask button down here to mask that out. I'm kind of liking that material a lot more, but it's just a little bit too dark for my liking. So I think I might try to duplicate it with Control J and mess with the lightness of this a little bit. Alright, I think that looks pretty cool. I'm going to try to put a glow effect around that a little bit later, I think, and try and make that pop a little bit more. Next up is our depth pass. What I would like to do with this is go ahead and use it to create a gradient blur, so as the image gets farther away from the camera, it becomes less in focus. So let's look at how we can do that. So what we want to do is we want to use this depth mask and use it as a blurring tool for our layer that we have here. So let's go ahead and Control Alt Shift N to create a new layer. And I'm just going to fill it with black to make sure that this mask gets applied on here correctly. So Control A, Control C, and I'm just gonna add that mask here. You can see that's obviously applied there, and we can come up here to filter, blur, lens blur, and as your source, go ahead and use the layer mask that we just made, and you're gonna see here that as that goes all the way back, it becomes a little bit more blurred. You can change your blur focal distance to kind of figure out where you want that to be. So it can be more focused on the whiter or black portion of the mask. For me, I'm setting my blur focal distance to 255 because that is completely white, which is my closest up portion of my image. Next up, just mess with the different settings that you have here in terms of radius and blur and all that until you find something that you like. Once you're done, go ahead and click OK, and that'll apply your lens blur to that layer. Once that's finished computing, you can go ahead and right-click, delete layer mask, and that will be able to show you how your blur was applied. You'll have that on a layer here all to itself. And for me, I'm actually going to hide this. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it or not, but I'm just going to go ahead and throw it up here. Alright, so we got a few lights here that I'm going to start messing with. I'm just going to highlight all of these by shift clicking and Control G to make them a group, and I'm going to call these my lights. Alright, let's start with the first light so you can just get an idea of the workflow. Control Shift N will give you a new layer without asking any questions. From there I'm going to press the G key, and I'm going to fill this with a reddish orange warm light. Right about there. Set this to multiply, and you'll see here that you're getting that warm filter applied there. And you can just highlight both of these and press Control E to merge them into one layer. From here you can mess with a bunch of different layering options up here, but pretty much linear dodge add, I believe, is the one we're going to want. Let's see here. Yes, I believe that's the one. And it's a little hard to see because the colors are already warm and we're applying a warm side light there. But if I turn this on and off, you can see how it kind of fills that in on the right side. From here you could even press Control J on your layer to duplicate that effect to essentially amplify it as much as you want. Right here I have about 6 of those, and that's a bit too strong for my liking, so I'm just gonna delete a bunch of those. And let's stick with 2 for now, and maybe we can do more or less depending on what we like from here. So for the left side, let's go ahead and same thing, new layer, and this time we'll fill it with a different color. Let's go for a more cool light. Somewhere in the light blue spectrum around here looks good. Multiply, merge those layers down, and set it to linear dodge add. And again, a little hard to tell, but I think you can see it if I flick this on and off. From here, again, you can duplicate that layer a couple times to kind of see that effect amplified. And finally, we'll do the backlight here. This is kind of somewhat of a fill light just because of the way this is wrapping around here. So let's go ahead and do another cool light, but we'll make it a little bit closer to purple. Now, looking at our cloud, it's starting to be a lot more specular than I would like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that best render that we had earlier, which was, if we look at it here, a lot less specular, and I'm going to apply that up above. So I'm just alt-click dragging that up here, turning all my stuff back on, and you can see the difference that that makes. Grab your ID mask, and we'll just do a select color range, and get rid of everything that we don't want. Alright, now let's take a look at messing with some of our specularity options. So let's go ahead and start with this one. There are a couple different layer types that you can use here. I prefer to use screen most of the time, or any of the options that are kind of in this lighten category. Linear dodge is kind of one of my favorites, but screen seems to do the job pretty well. So that seems like it might be a little too bright, so you can go ahead and mess with your opacity from there, or maybe it's not bright enough, so again you can just Control J to duplicate that and kind of amplify its effect. Now the shadow pass that you get from ZBrush, depending on how you did your render, It's typically incredibly strong and sharp, which is what we have here. I rendered it out, but I'm not actually going to use it. If you would like to though, you can go ahead and set it to a multiply. Multiply is a layer effect that's going to do pretty much exactly what you want for your shadows. And then of course from there you can mess with your opacity as well. So we might actually use this a tiny bit just to kind of pop those shadows on the bottom, but it's just giving me kind of a weird silhouette down there, so I think I'm going to avoid it for now. Now for your subsurface scattering pass here, you can apply some color to it, get some warm color on it, kind of like we did with the lights down here. And that's going to allow you to get that kind of subsurface scattering effect if you were maybe working on skin. But for another use of this layer, this render pass, you can press Ctrl I to invert the colors and set it to multiply, and that's going to kind of give you this kind of vignette appearance around your model. And you can kind of see it a lot more in the back as it fades into black, but up here it's just so dark that it's a little difficult to tell. From here you can do any additional composition effects that you want to do. Maybe if you want to render out some more clouds in the background, or maybe if you want to help blur this out as it's going back, or maybe even decrease that blur effect a little bit. It's all up to you, but I'm just going to go ahead and play around with this and fast forward as I do so. Alright, that's going to be it for this video, guys. This begins the speed sculpt portion of this video. I decided to do the first kind of 17 minutes as the tutorial section, where I'm kind of talking about rendering, getting everything composited into Photoshop. But from here, the next 5 minutes are just going to be me essentially playing around in ZBrush, just experimenting, doing a quick speed sculpt. It was about 30 minutes and I have it sped up here for you. So hey, new videos Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Don't forget, look out for those. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I hope you learned something new from this video, got a little inspired to work on your own stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys.